Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Ashley O'Rourke webinar, where we're going to give you a taste and introduce you to our formation model that we use in the programs for healthcare ministry leaders. So my name is Tom Bushlack, and I am joined here by my esteemed colleague, Sister Colleen Mallon. We are the co-directors of the Ashley O'Rourke Center. I'm also an associate professor of moral theology, and Sister Colleen is associate professor of systematic theology in our program as well. A couple notes about the technology for those of you joining us. If you're joining us live, you'll be able to choose where you want to focus, whether it's on the video of us or on the PowerPoint slide, simply by clicking on it, and that'll maximize that in your screen. You also do have the option of submitting some questions or comments if you have them as we go along. We have off screen to the side our tech support, Dan Moore, will be monitoring, so you can click on the little chat button and type in a question if you have that. And that's for those of you watching live. If you're watching this later as the recording, you won't have that, but you can always email us.
Correct.
So that is by way of introduction, so thank you again for being here with us. We really appreciate you taking the time. I wanted to start with a quick prayer. So wherever you are, take a moment just to center yourself and invite the divine presence to be with us. And we pray, Lord our God, we ask your divine assistance in the task of forming us to be leaders in the healing ministry of Jesus. Because we serve you in this service to Catholic healthcare, may this webinar be a prayerful and worshipful gathering. May our vision as leaders of Catholic healthcare extend beyond material things and encompass the ideals of the gospel and of your Son, Jesus Christ. Help us to think beyond the boundaries of our organizations and to truly be Catholic, universal, in our service to the local and the global church. May we, by this meeting, hasten the coming of the kingdom. And we begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So thank you again for those of you tuning in. And just to give you a quick introduction to the Ashley O'Rourke Center, which is a ministry of the Aquinas Institute of Theology here in St. Louis. Our mission is to promote the transformative potential of the healing ministry of Jesus by offering programs that integrate theological education and spiritual formation for leaders at all levels of Catholic healthcare. Now, I joined the team here with Sister Colleen a couple of years ago after doing some initial consulting work, and our president commented at the time that whenever he walked by, he felt smoke coming out of the room. So we're happy to keep that energy going with you all. And the thing that we want to focus on today is what I've started calling the Ashley O'Rourke, or the AOR for short, our trifecta. And that's what we offer is a combination of theological education, spiritual formation, and leadership development. And we really believe that provides a distinctive set of skills from our programs to leaders in Catholic healthcare. So that's what we're going to unpack with you today. I'm going to hand it over to Sister Colleen.
So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. We're really grateful. And I thought before we got started that we would like to share some assumptions with you that we hold in terms of our programming. But even before that, I'd like to share a story that will, I hope, help to amplify these assumptions. So a couple of years ago, when I myself was in formation and I had the opportunity of being in one of our ministries, I was in a first grade classroom, and I was really shadowing one of our sister teachers. And she asked me if I would watch over one of our students who was going kind of slow. And particularly, he was not coloring the way, she's an artist, and so she wanted everything colored and wanted me to help motivate him. So I thought, okay, this is my job. And I asked him a question, and we talked, and finally I shared with him that my favorite color was red. No, pardon me, green, green. And he looked at me like, really? And I said, yeah. And he said, I hate green. And I thought, what's wrong with green? And I asked him, and he said, it's the color of the devil. okay. I had to think about this a little bit. I thought, that's a big leap. So I decided to ask him, if the devil's green, then what color's God? And he looked at me like I really didn't know much about this world at all.
Or theology.
All right. And he said, God is red. And I said, well, how do you know God is red? Because when I'm outside playing with my friends and we're running around and having fun, sometimes I run into the bathroom and I look in the mirror and my face is red and I know God is there. I know God is with me. So in the light of that, these lessons that we learn from our littlest theologians, I'd like to share some of our basic assumptions when we begin this process of the trifecta that Tom shared about, particularly how we do formation and what are our assumptions there. And the first assumption is that every human being is spiritual. My little first grade theologian taught me that right off the bat. He already had a relationship with God. And this little man, he knew that he was in relationship with God, and he understood that when God was close, he was happy. And so what an amazing thing to learn from a little person, right? So every human being is spiritual, and that means every human being has a spirituality. And that spirituality is their relationship with the transcendent, however they have come to know the transcendent. Now, having a spirituality doesn't necessarily mean that our spirituality is functioning in a way that is going to be most life-giving. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that spiritual people are necessarily good people, and therefore non-spiritual people are not. Well, first of all, there's no such thing as non-spiritual people, right? But there is the possibility that our spiritualities are not being productive in a way that are allowing for the flourishing of our full humanity. And we can talk about spiritualities that are actually toxic. And one of the things that we want to be clear about in our formation program is that we want our students to grow and understand how their spirituality can allow them to have the best possible relationship they can have with their understanding of our God. So that leads us to really embrace the idea that whether we like it or not, we're always being formed. Our spirituality is always being shaped by something that's outside of us. And so whether we intend it or not, formation is happening. How much better then if we are conscious of what's happening in our formation? If we're intentional about what it is that we allow to feed our spirit, and then intentional about those things that will be practices that allow our spirit to grow. And so these are our assumptions. We believe in formation. We know that it's happening one way or the other. And so what we want to do is help direct our students and our participants to be intentional about their spiritual formation, to understand that it's both personal and communal, and that this is where the seeds of transformation lie. So, as it says in the little PowerPoint, in 2 words, it matters. We'd like, at this point, to share a little bit more with you, too, about our philosophy of formation. So, given our assumptions, how is it that we approach this process of formation? I think the tree says it all. What the tree and the visual here shows us is that the interior matters to the exterior. And if there's something flourishing interiorly, it can't help but be shown exteriorly. And so, as you see on those upper boxes, the red and the brown, you'll see that the individual interior, right, those values and dispositions that we hold, we're looking for alignment with. We're trying to help our students understand that spiritual formation is about aligning that interior world with exterior concrete actions. So I invite you to take a second And think about one thing, one value that you hold, that you would really, it is a part of you. It's a part of your hopes for what you would like for your life. But you're also aware of the fact that maybe it's not completely operationalized yet. And I want you to think about what that might be. And then visualize what it would look like if that interior disposition, value, virtue, if you really were to live it. What might be different, right? I know for some of us, it has to do with dieting, right? Or making sure that we exercise and visualizing, what do we look like if we were consistent there, right? Going deeper, what would it look like if your compassion really had an opportunity to be lived? And what were the things that get in the way of your compassion? Is it anxiety because the job is just always on top of you and you're all going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and sometimes that compassion that you feel deeply in your heart doesn't find its way out in those behaviors, right? So again, I wanted to give you a sense of what we mean by this alignment. It's one thing to hold something, it's another thing to live it. And formation is about this opportunity by which we we don't do it, but I'll be honest with you, it's the Holy Spirit. It's the Holy Spirit that...
At best, we facilitate.
That's right. That's exactly it.
At best.
We hope that we can be agents of setting up the frameworks that allow for that encounter to happen and can be a space where our students and our participants can encounter certain gifts and talents and then practice them and see what happens. Tom, I don't know if you want to say anything about that or you want to add anything?
I think I have more in a minute, but if you want to go to the next.
Yeah, we'll go to the next one. So specifically then, if you want to look at that grid that we're offering you right now, we are following a pattern that was established really by Ken Wilber and then adapted by our colleague Bill Brinkman, who is really a mentor to both Tom and I in this work. And so when we think about introducing our students to formation, our participants to formation, we think about human experience within 4 dimensions of this quadrant, right? And that there are our one experience can be experienced both individually and communally. It's also experienced interiorly and exteriorly. And so what we're looking for in any one time in formation is how do we bring that together? How do we bring consciousness to that? How do we bring it together? So our starting place is to start with that lower left and to begin to introduce our students to the tradition and the culture out of which Catholic healthcare has emerged. The vision, the tradition, the values, the ethos. And so that's really where the bulk of our theological study comes from, right? So essentially what we're trying to do is give our students really good theology.
And that is our meat and potatoes.
That's
we are
right.
a graduate school in theology. So
Correct. That is the heart of what we do here at Aquinas. And why is it important? Why is it transformative? Well, let me share a story. A priest friend of mine was preaching in a local parish. I had just happened to be there, and he told a story about his family and the fact that his mother had gotten quite ill when he was a young man, young person actually, maybe 13, 12. And she was close to death. She didn't die at that particular time, but she was close to death. And his mother was Anglican, his father Catholic. His uncle, who was his father's brother, very, very devout Catholic, basically came in and said to him one day, "You better go in there and say goodbye to your mother. You're never going to see her again because she's going to hell. She's not Catholic." Well, you can imagine, the entire church just had this huge, like, no, he didn't do that. And then my friend said to the congregation, "My uncle was not a bad person. He was a bad theologian." And so that's exactly this quadrant, this area, this lower left of our formation journey is really about equipping our students with good theology helping them understand what it means to encounter a loving God and to what that means to their humanity. And then what happens to their theology of suffering? How are they going to encounter and engage with people who are in difficult straits, whether it be their clients, their patients, or it could very well be their associates, right? So it's from then, that grounding in theology, that we hope and we work and talk with our students about what's happening in that upper left. How's it impacting you personally? You know, where, in one way, is one of the analogies I use, how is this theology rearranging the furniture in your spiritual life? You know, and one
Often in ways that we would rather not have them rearranged.
Exactly. And I remember one senior leader, when I made the comment to them, God is interested in you. And she said to me afterwards, I will spend weeks now trying to wrap my mind around the notion that God is interested in me. Wow, this little tiny piece of theology, right? And now it's gone into her spirit. She's thinking about it, she's reflecting on it, and it is rearranging her whole understanding of the divine. I want to share a little bit more about how that impacts the third quadrant, the upper right, but I want to give Tom a chance to share a little bit about what we've been learning around the growth in this area that is so integral to quality formation. So,
yeah, thanks. So I want to say something about the fact that if that bottom left in the theological education that we do is really the meat and potatoes, as I put it, and the spiritual formation and the leadership development are the tools of operationalizing that theology, both personally but also in the organizations where you work, and probably in other communal contexts as well. And I think there can sometimes be this perception that theology can be really meaty and heady and academic, but that formation is kind of light and fluffy and hard to wrap your fingers around. And so what I want to give you is an example of how we can bring together really good research that's been done on how spiritual practices can affect leadership performance. And as an example of the transformation that can happen in that upper left quadrant. So there's a study of leadership done in a book published called Leadership Agility by Joyner and Josephs. And it's a long-term study where they gathered data over a couple decades, and they studied they took people who were already high-level performers, and then they further categorized them into what distinguished the best among the cream of the crop, the cream of the cream, literally. Now, one of the things that they noticed was that one of the key skills that all very high-functioning leaders were able to exemplify was what they called reflective action. And I've put how Joyner and Josephs describe reflective action up on your screen. They describe it as the ability to step back in the moment and attend directly, but very briefly, to a current assumption, feeling, or behavior that would otherwise escape your attention. I'm going to read that again. The ability to step back in the moment and attend directly, but very briefly, to a current assumption, feeling, or behavior that would otherwise escape your attention. Now let's think of an example here. We probably all today have had the experience of being in a conversation with somebody and you find yourself being triggered by something. You're annoyed, or your mind is wandering to something else that you need to be doing, that you'd rather be doing. And that noticing is the skill of reflective action. The further skill then of being a good leader is to say, I can't go off and do that right now, and I can't dismiss this person. I need to stay present and come back to that. It's kind of a form of emotional intelligence as well. Now, one of the things that I found really interesting about Joyner and Joseph's study is that they found that they write about reflective action that one of the most reliable ways to cultivate this quality of attention is through a meditation practice that emphasizes present-centered awareness. So one of the things that I did when I used this text in formation with our students to back it up with data is, we practice some really basic spiritual practices of mindful awareness, We talked about how they fit into a prayer life, since we are doing this within a mission-oriented culture. And just to kind of cap this off as a skill, so we practice this as a skill set. We have the students go home, practice, we give them kind of homework of a spiritual practice as a leadership tool, and then the next time they came back, we asked them to reflect upon how they're integrating that and what they learned. The last piece that I want to note from Joyner and Joseph's in terms of the data that they have is that they found, so of these already high-performing people, the top 5% within that, so probably less than 1% of the population in general, they found that among that top 5% of high-performing leaders, more than half have a daily or a semi-regular practice of meditation or spiritual practice of present-centered awareness that trains awareness and attention, that can inform that skill of reflective action that we started with. Now, there's a really solid piece where spiritual formation as a leadership tool can be tied to the theological training that we give that has a real impact on how people lead. So I'm going to hand it back to you to finish out the quadrants.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, I think that, pardon me, Tom's sharing about reflective action is so critical because this area, the upper left, is such a significant area for personal growth and in leadership. And it's something that we take very seriously in terms of offering our students a variety of opportunities in order to continue to reflect on what it is that is motivating them, how they can grow what I call spiritual maturity. And so that there will be a variety of ways in which we engage the adult spiritual journey and ask people to become vulnerable to self-understanding and to be willing then to share that with the cohort that they are with and with ourselves. And what we have found is that in that context, there is such a sacredness that occurs among us because we realize that we're holding each other's very, very significant journey and growth into the divine. And it's a very powerful experience. So I guess part of what I want to share with you as we move from the upper left to the upper right is to highlight how important it is that we help our students understand that it's not simply enough to engage in spiritual practices, but it's also to watch how those practices are impacting their concrete behavior. Because ultimately, for all of us, if you want to know what I believe, watch what I do. That really gives you a sense of the level of integration. I may want desperately to be a highly motivated, highly virtuous person, but you'll only know whether or not that integration has happened if my behaviors reflect that. And so that's really a critical thing. So I never had a chance to go back to that senior leader to ask her, gee, what was it like, 8 weeks later, 2 years later, in terms of thinking about the notion that God really cares for me, God is interested in me. And I can only imagine the kinds of behaviors, if she paid attention and if she followed that lead internally, I can only imagine where it might have taken her. I'm guessing she might have been interested in learning more about prayer. She might have turned to scriptures to learn a little bit more about scriptures. Maybe she went to a group of friends that she knew had a faith relationship with God and just simply entered into conversations with them about, how do I put my mind around this, right? So these are all new behaviors that could be flowing out of this little general, thank you, this little understanding. So ultimately, when these behaviors are behaviors that happen in a large group of people who have gone through formation, it really is our dream that the transformation of an institution can truly happen. And that leads us to the bottom quadrant, the lower right, that place where where, the life of the ministry happens concretely. And then how will it be that the formed and transformed persons can effect the kinds of policies and the kinds of the kinds of corporate actions that actually express the written culture, or the culture that is really meant to be the gospel culture of Catholic healthcare. And I think, Tom, you want to share a little bit about that.
So really, when we talk about moving from the lower left all the way around the wheel through personal disposition into behavior to then corporate culture or business system, that's kind of the ultimate goal of what we want our students and participants to be able to do effectively. And just to give you an example, that Sister Jean DeBlois, who was I think the original founder of our programming, who had come from nursing and then stepped into the role of professional theologian. She likes to tell this story of a student who was studying Catholic social teaching, and particularly principles of justice and distributive justice, preferential option for the poor and vulnerable, the common good, and thinking about the pay scale within her, or within this leader's organization. And started to feel like that there could be perhaps a more equitable way to address that within their organization. And because of kind of knowing being grounded in the theology and knowing what the prophetic voice that called this person to, had the courage through the spiritual and the leadership formation to take that to some of the senior leaders within that person's organization and to start a conversation around executive compensation that led to, and then the person wasn't fired, in fact, was recognized as honoring the values of Catholic healthcare and the organization, that led to a conversation that really had a real impact on how they were thinking about equity in pay from the executive level down to the lower levels of pay. So that's an example where business systems on that lower right quadrant can be informed by the theological, the personal, and the corporate kind of coming together. And that's the goal, the sweet spot of what we are aiming for in our programs.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I'm back to you.
No, I
okay.
think
You're
it's
right.
you now, yeah.
Pardon me.
No problem.
So let me say a little bit now. We're both going to speak very briefly about the two primary programs that we offer. And I'm going to say something first about the Certificate for Mission Leadership. And the CML, for short, as we call it, is really intended for leaders at any and all levels of Catholic healthcare who are, as it says here, committed to supporting and furthering the mission of their organization. And that can include persons who are considering formal leadership positions in Catholic healthcare, or those who want to deepen their commitment to the future of Catholic healthcare. So Sister Colleen's going to say a few words about the MA that we offer. The certificate program is designed for people who may not yet be directly in a mission alignment and integration role in Catholic healthcare, but who have some kind of heart for the mission and want to go a little bit deeper. And so I won't go through them all. The courses in the certificate program are listed there. It's a 2-year program that we have an opening and a closing retreat. And since we're focusing in particular on that trifecta of theological education, spiritual formation, and leadership development, let me just say for now, the formation happens in particular in that opening retreat where you meet the other cohort members here in St. Louis. You are introduced to the Wilber model that we use. You get some practice with some of the spiritual and leadership practices. And then the courses meet online asynchronously with once a course meeting together synchronously online. And we follow up then in terms of the online discussion and dialogue that's happening, reflecting on the readings, people talking about how they're operationalizing those ideals. And I'll end with just a quick story of another success story of a participant from the certificate program who was in pastoral care and through the course of the program was really learning to translate the language of theology into operational mission of healthcare. And her senior leadership team at her healthcare organization recognized that she was bringing this new set of skills and actually invited her to come to the table of the executive leadership team so that she could contribute the knowledge and the insight that she was bringing from this program. So that was sort of a promotion and a movement into a higher leadership position because of what they saw in this person as she was reflecting and operationalizing the core teachings of the program. So that's a little success story that I'll leave you with. And I'll turn it back to Colleen to talk about the MA program.
The MA program, certainly. So, one of the things that we like to say about this CML is that it's an opportunity for people who are the frontline people to really be they're going to be the frontline interpreters of the tradition. So I think, this was a wonderful testament to the fact how well she had integrated that tradition, and it was so recognizable. Our MA in healthcare mission is really meant to be for those leaders that you see that are going to take on the role of mission within the organization. And what I've listed here are simply some of the degree program outcomes so that you have it to get a sense of the kinds of expectations that we hold for our MA students. And
those are available on the website, I believe, right?
Yeah, they are on the website as well. What I would tell you is that it's a good program. It's an intense program. They take courses one at a time as a cohort, form a wisdom community. We're currently in cohort 11 and looking forward to cohort 12 starting in July. And really, this program truly integrates that trifecta because our students are taking graduate level theology courses. They do that online, but then for every course, they come here to Aquinas Institute. They're with us from Tuesday until Friday for a face-to-face encounter with their instructor. And so that's the theological training that they're integrating. At the same time, they will also have a session in leadership formation where we have a content expert in different areas of leadership to come in and spend about 2 hours with them, talking with them about maybe the latest challenges and ways in which this particular content leader has been able to negotiate that. When they're given homework around that so they can practice between intensives and then report back to each other how it is that they have implemented some of that leadership. And then they also have spiritual formation. So we will spend time in, thinking together, reflecting and praying together at different elements that are part of the adult spiritual journey. So it's a very comprehensive program, one that we are very, very proud of. And mostly, it's not so much the program we're proud of as it is our students and the difference that they're making in Catholic healthcare. We're just so very proud of them. I want to share the last course that we have with this group is their Theology of Ministry Integrative Seminar. And this past year, one of the students wrote what I thought was a particularly amazing operative theology statement. In other words, what am I working out of as a result of having gone through this 2-year program and being intensely engaged in both formation, leadership formation, and theological education? I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to try to unpack it a little bit, because if you read it fast, it goes really fast, and you don't get all the, I don't think you get the whole impact of it, but I tell you, I almost fell off my chair when she read it. From an orientation and a way of life rooted in the principles of Catholic social teaching, the reign of God is effected and transmitted by the sacrament of my presence in the world. Wow. A way of life. Not just simply theological knowledge, and I can check that box off, I took Catholic social teaching. She's convinced that Catholic social teaching has opened a form of life for her that she will live as faithfully as she can. And that she feels that she is an agent of the reign of God. She's learned something about this reign that she's utterly committed to, and sees Catholic healthcare as the place in which she can offer herself to the reign of God. And it will be transmitted by the sacrament. She understands that profound Catholic sensibility of how the material and the spiritual come together, and that how God communicates God's self to us in the materiality of our living, in the materiality, the bodily existence of another human being whose touch and care and attention to us communicates not just their love, but God's love. So I think this is a leader that got it and still gets it. And,
There's a
and
lot
we-
of them out there
yeah,
already.
and
Yeah.
many of them that but again, we're hoping that this presentation has been helpful for you to get a sense of why formation is so significant here at Aquinas as part of our programming. And we're hoping that you will, if you have any questions, we can answer them. And I don't know, Tom, if you'd like to share anything.
I just wanted to close by saying thank you to those of you who have joined us live, and for those of you who might be viewing later as the recording, thanks for taking the time. I know we're all busy, crazy busy, so your time is valuable. We appreciate it. We hope you found this enriching for your own work and thought about the future of where you might be in Catholic healthcare. I've put up our contact information there, so we really would love to hear from you. The main information about all of our programs is at that website listed there. If you send an email to aor@ai.edu, we both get it.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of us or both of us will respond. So if you have any further questions or follow-up, and also if you maybe, you might be discerning for yourself if one of these programs is right for you, but if you also know of somebody who might be interested, we really appreciate your help in passing the word along. This video will eventually be up on YouTube, even sharing it on your social media sites and just getting it out there if you enjoyed it and you think it might be helpful for others. So thank you again, and may you be blessed in the ministry that you're doing and continue with the good work. And let us know if we can help.
Amen. Amen. Any questions, Dan? Did we hear from you? Okay. Well, we thank you so much for letting us be part of your day today.
All right.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.